Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Thanks for joining us on this 4th of July weekend. We're back with Colonel Douglas Macgregor, served ably to President Donald Trump as the senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense. Today, he is the Chief Executive Officer of Our Country, Our Choice, a grassroots organization seeking to educate the American people about the very real dangers America faces. You can find them at ourchoice.com. I urge you to go there to see more about the extraordinary efforts by Colonel Macgregor. Colonel Macgregor, I noticed that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an independent presidential candidate, it is still in my mind unclear whether he will, in fact, garner the ballot access in enough states to theoretically win 270 electoral votes. He claims that he will, but having run this process one time for the Libertarian Party candidate, Governor Gary Johnson, I understand the complexities and the enormous expense. But Kennedy says that there is no military threat from China, that they don't pose a military threat to us. Yet last week on this very show, Christy Hutchison with Women Fighting for America, who's extremely knowledgeable about what's going on both our southern and northern border, noted the disproportionate number of military-age Chinese and Middle Eastern ethnic illegals entering the country. If you had to tell us what China's master plan is, do they intend to just take us over from inside, because they have burrowed into all strata of American life? They're in big business, they're in academia, they're buying up huge swaths of real estate, not just around military installations, but also prime ranch land and farmland that's used to provide food for this country. What is the Chinese strategy, as best you can tell?
Well, you just identified what the real threat is. That most people in Asia are familiar with it because they've lived with the Chinese for thousands of years. It's not military. The Chinese military is probably, compared with the Japanese, several levels below the competence and capabilities of the Japanese armed forces. It's wholly defensive in orientation. But China's principal threat is its economic imperialism and its fecundity. If you go back in Asia, you introduce large numbers of Chinese into a particular country. They not only rapidly reproduce, they're very tribal, they hang together, and they begin pooling their money and their assets in order to do exactly what you're describing, buy up businesses, buy up territory. And all of a sudden, after about a decade, people in the country wake up and say, well, what happened to our country? We no longer own it. We don't govern it. I think that's a serious problem. And it's why I keep going back to the border. People say, well, the Chinese are doing this, and we have all these people coming in from the Middle East. Well, close the border. For God's sakes, close the border. That has to happen. We should have 50, 60,000 troops on the border right now. That place should be locked down tight as a drum. We're living next to Mexico, which is an organized crime state. It survives on the money that it makes from us for all the drugs and human trafficking that go on. But they're not going to stop anybody from anywhere going into the United States. They'll facilitate it. They see these people as potential customers, and anything that weakens us internally is good for their business. So the first thing is close it down. Second, you've got to enforce the law. And as I tell people all the time, you're worried about China. They say, oh, yeah, I'm very worried about China. I said, well, then why don't we expel the Chinese inside the United States? And they say, well, shouldn't we go to war? No, you don't go to war, but send the Chinese home. Most of these young men, by the way, that are coming in are not military. A lot of these, in fact, I would say almost half of them, are wanted by Chinese authorities. They're white-collar criminals. The Chinese government would like to get them back and prosecute them. But remember something that historically, and the Koreans will tell you this, the Japanese will tell you this, the Vietnamese will tell you, they all understand this. They will tell you that every Chinese that leaves China is taken aside and said, now you understand, wherever you go, whatever you do, if you find anything of value to China, you send it back to China. And this has been going on for thousands of years. So the presence of large numbers of Chinese in any of the Asian countries, in Canada, now here in the United States, these communities are sources of intellectual property, money, understanding, power, territory, all of those things combined for China. And that's the threat. And that's what we should be concerned about. But for some reason, it doesn't get a lot of attention. I'm glad that people are seeing these young men come in, but I don't see them as a military threat or a threat of violence. The people we should be worried about in terms of violence, other than the Mexican cartels and organized crime, are these Islamists. And for years, Hezbollah has had a large chapter down in Mexico. We've always known that if we end up in a war with Iran, that we're going to have hell to pay here inside the United States. ISIS is strongly represented down in Mexico. Again, you never hear these things. And that doesn't even begin to address the larger problem of immigration in terms of financial costs to the country, you know, the destruction of our society, the dilution of our national identity. We go on and on. Those things are where we ought to focus right now. And we ought to get all the troops that we have sitting on the border with Ukraine up and down, and most of the ones that are sitting, in my judgment, in places like Okinawa and South Korea, and they should be on our borders as soon as possible.
All right. We are almost out of time. Tell us about Our Country, Our Choice, which you can contact at ourcountryourchoice.com, and the important work you're doing there.
Well, Our Country, Our Choice was founded by a group of Americans who said, you know, we continue to vote. We vote for Democrats. We vote for Republicans. We don't get any fundamental change in policy. Nothing improves. So we can't go on like this. So we want to found an organization that is going to appeal to Democrats and Republicans across party lines. And we want to unite around critical issues. We want to unite the country, not divide it. So we want to avoid divisive issues. So let's start with the issues that we're talking about. The border is clear and unambiguous. The restoration of the rule of law inside the United States and our cities. That's number one. Ending these overseas interventions that have cost us trillions of dollars, destroyed hundreds of thousands of lives. People tell me all the time, well, we didn't take that many casualties. How many American servicemen or veterans kill themselves on a daily basis in this country? I'm telling you, we've destroyed hundreds of thousands of American lives in these things. We've wasted money. A small elite has profited. But as far as the country is concerned, we have not benefited from any of this. And this goes back to the kinds of things that Donald Trump kept saying when he was in Japan on a visit, when he was in Europe. What do we get out of it? Where's our return on investment? And of course, he was always right. And then finally, what are we doing about the sexualization of our children? You know, what are we doing about what they read in school and how they are being groomed and misled and told they're something they're not and confusing them? What are we doing about this assault on our national identity, our culture, our way of life? Why the constant denigration of everything that is American? We're dealing with a government that is hostile to us. And I think we need to realize this. I think Americans sense it, but it's very serious, and we're going to be lucky to survive it. And that's one of the reasons that, I called for an early election. Obviously, President Biden should not have to be in office, and he should be removed. Most people agree with that. But the problem is that won't get us out of the mess we're in right now. If we can get an early election and hold a fair and honest election, go back to basics and say it has to all be paper ballot. You have to show up on the day of voting. None of this nonsense of, absentee ballots that come out of outer space and then end up in great quantities in the hands of people. Hold a real election. Make people walk in and say, yes, I am a citizen of the United States. This is where I legally live, and prove it. If we went to that, we could have a new government in short order. And I think that could be a very successful election. I mean, India has 1 billion people, and they managed to hold elections, national elections, on one day, all with paper ballots, count it, and the next day they know what the new government looks like. So if India can do that with almost 1 billion people, surely we can do the same thing here.
All right, I want to thank our guest, Colonel Douglas Macgregor. Once again, you can find him at ourcountryourchoice.com. Colonel, thank you for joining us on this very special July 4th weekend.
Roger, thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks, for our final segment of The Roger Stone Show on this very special 4th of July weekend. Joining me now is George Papadopoulos. George Papadopoulos was a foreign policy advisor to President Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, but more precisely, he is a man who, like me, was targeted by special counsel Robert Mueller, and I think, like me, has never really had the opportunity to tell the full story of how we was victimized. I could actually probably market a T-shirt that said George Papadopoulos did nothing wrong, and he joins us now from Los Angeles. George, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So let's walk through this, because it is not written. You have a great book, but unfortunately, you know how that is. The Washington Post won't be reviewing it anytime soon, nor will the New York Times review of books. But walk my audience through how you were victimized in the 2016 campaign.
Yeah, it's a very dark chapter in American history, and I definitely like that idea of this shirt. The Roger Stone did nothing wrong, Papadopoulos did nothing wrong, because I think in many ways we definitely have a parallel story when it came to really supporting what at that time was an incipient populist, nationalist candidate, and an entire movement that was just ascending and reverberating throughout the entire United States and arguably around the world after Brexit. So I had worked before that movement started with a lot of these so-called establishment types at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. A lot of these W. Bush people, Reagan officials, people like Douglas Feith, Scooter Libby, these type of people. And the summer of 2015 comes around, and I realized that after disastrous years of the W administration, disastrous years of the Obama administration, that America needed change. And that change, of course, was Donald Trump. As soon as Donald Trump went down those escalators, I think around 12 hours later, I messaged Corey Lewandowski, who many people, of course, didn't know at the time. No one, of course, knew who I was at the time. It was you and a couple others who were notable on the campaign, and I said, I think you have a winner here. I want to join this campaign. Moving forward, the campaign didn't expand for a while. I joined Ben Carson's campaign as a foreign policy advisor, and right when I joined Trump's campaign, actually I should say before even the Washington Post knew that I joined Trump's campaign in March of 2016, there was an ongoing operation that later was revealed by the CIA that was there to quote-unquote bump officials like myself, you, 25 others, to essentially create the fix that would later go on to become Crossfire Hurricane, Mueller, Impeachment 1.0, 2.0, and then it goes on and on until Trump's recent conviction.
So tell us about this mysterious professor, Professor Mifsud. Who is this guy and where is he and what role did he play here?
So when I first started on the Trump campaign, I was actually based in London, and this is why things get really murky here, because what the report revealed in March of this past year, so just recently, about 4 months ago or so, was that there was an operation that was launched essentially in London that was at the behest of not only the CIA, but the Five Eyes intelligence sharing countries, which includes the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, the United States, and Australia. So what these countries do essentially, Roger, and for all your listeners, is they share intelligence. If the United States has a citizen who's living in London, let's say, or abroad, they can call the British intelligence services and say, hey, look, this American, in theory, has protections under the Constitution that we can't penetrate, so why don't you do our dirty work for you? So the point I'm making is, when I started on the campaign, I was introduced in Rome to this guy, Mifsud. Now, Mifsud, for many of your viewers who remember, is at the heart of not only the Mueller investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, the Horowitz investigation, but also the Durham investigation. He was introduced to me by the Italian foreign minister, Vincenzo Scotti. So we're talking very high-level people here facilitating meetings to a man who later became the center of an espionage scandal against Donald Trump and Donald Trump's campaign. That included foreign intelligence groups. So he tells me unsolicited one day over brunch, hey, did you know that the Russians are doing something with Hillary? And I said nothing about it. You know, there was a lot of rumors in the media for months at that time that Hillary's email server was, sabotaged, that she had her own private server. So it really was part of this entire narrative that they used people like him. They used people that bumped into you, that you've talked about, others like Michael Flynn that they were running into to create this fake pretext to launch these fake investigations that went absolutely nowhere except completely destroying the credibility of the United States government and the FBI.
Now, interestingly enough, John Solomon at Just the News reported that the prosecutor in your case, Aaron Zelinsky, just happened to also be the prosecutor in my case, actually altered the FBI 302, that when you were asked by the FBI if you would help locate the elusive Professor Mifsud, you said yes, of course, but they altered your 302 to say no, that you would not. This is, to me, egregious prosecutorial misconduct. Have you, although it may go nowhere, of course, have you considered filing a formal complaint over that?
Well, absolutely, Roger. And what I've been very disappointed in Congress, because I felt, first and foremost, and I've said this since the beginning, if they held them accountable for what they did to the 2016 campaign, which you were a victim of yourself and Donald Trump was a victim of, and more importantly, over 75 million patriots who voted for President Trump were the ultimate victims, who saw their vote basically potentially usurped and replaced by the administrative state. If those people that concocted Crossfire Hurricane, Comey's, the McCabe's, Mueller, people like Mifsud and all these foreign governments that targeted the campaign and basically, were involved in the worst political dirty trick in modern American history, I don't think Donald Trump would have, first of all, been raided. He would not have been indicted, and certainly we would have never seen him in a kangaroo court in New York and all these various bizarre cases that are going on around him. And when it comes to the egregious misconduct of the Mueller prosecutors, it goes to exactly what I said. They got away with doing it to me, to you, to others, so they continued this lawfare with Donald Trump. So, of course, Congress, I felt, especially during the Durham testimony, had an opportunity to basically hammer it home, take all these people down, subpoena witnesses that Durham clearly felt he couldn't publicly expose, but they decided not to do it. It seems like they want to sweep this underneath the rug of history. And based on that, it's making my case very difficult to litigate, because a lot of the information, including from this mysterious Joseph Mifsud, has never been declassified. John Durham basically stood there stone-faced and said, I can't talk about this guy. So it's making life very difficult, not only for my case, myself, but of course, transparency and accountability for the United States and its people.
I know exactly how you feel. My case is still sealed, and I'm not allowed to even speak about it, except for in extraordinarily general terms. I honestly think this is why those who oppose President Trump are prepared to do whatever is necessary to stop him, because some of them, not all of them obviously, but some of them realize that they are guilty of treason and they are prosecutable. No, this is not about revenge. It's about equal protection under the law. I was charged with lying to Congress in my voluntary testimony before the House Intelligence Committee. But in order to violate the False Statements Act, which is what they charged me with, your statement has to be willful, but more importantly, it has to be material. I never had any motive whatsoever to lie. I told the truth about two things. One, that I simply set up a Google News alert on my computer and very carefully followed what Julian Assange was saying. Assange himself said that he had information on the Democrats and Hillary that he would release. And I relied on one source, New York radio host Randy Credico, who told me in a text message that this information would come down in October, that it would be political dynamite. And when I asked him how he knew that, he said that he knew a woman lawyer who worked for WikiLeaks, and I shouldn't ask any more questions about it. The Mueller prosecutors had that text in writing, proves that everything I said was true. But nonetheless, I learned the hard way that in the District of Columbia, no non-Democrat, no Trump supporter certainly, no Republican, no free thinker, no one whose political beliefs are adverse to the ruling party can expect a fair trial. To this day, I look at the parallels between what they did to Trump and what they did to me. In order for the financial transactions involved in the New York so-called hush money matter, those transactions would have to be material to, related to, or designed to cover up some underlying criminal activity. Yet, District Attorney Alvin Bragg is unable to identify what that would be. Otherwise, those charges would be a misdemeanor, and it would be a business records case in which you usually pay a small fine. It only becomes a criminal case if you can demonstrate that it was covering some underlying federal crime. Just as Judge Amy Berman Jackson would not allow me to bring Bill Binney, the former CIA counterintelligence officer and IT expert, as an expert witness in which I could have proved between his testimony and forensic evidence that the Democratic National Committee was never hacked by the Russians or anyone else, and whatever information Julian Assange had to have been the source of a leak rather than a hack Now that Assange is free, even though he has pled to get his current freedom, I'm hopeful, actually, that he will speak out. By the way, he said on many occasions that while he enjoyed the way that I was trolling the Democrats on my Twitter profile before, of course, it was suspended, that I had received nothing from him. I did not work from WikiLeaks. The one contact I have with them is innocuous, but that didn't stop the New York Times from putting it in a headline. It is one of the great travesties of our time. Because I was under a gag order, much like Donald Trump in New York, I've never had a chance to tell my side of the story. But I will. Of course, it'll be ancient history by that time. I am laboring at a book that may lay this all out before I ride on ahead, as they say. But I'm more interested in the fight going on today. I really think that what we've seen just over the last 10 days in the debate, in this correct Supreme Court decision that is just making Democrats go out of their minds. I saw Zoe Lofgren, the congresswoman from Northern California, couldn't tell whether she was drunk or not, but she actually suggested that Biden should order the military to take out, I assume that means kill, the 3 conservative members of the U.S. Supreme Court who ruled adverse to what she wanted. Now, if I did that, the FBI would raid my home yet again. But she does this with impunity. It is an extraordinary double standard. Do you feel that way, George?
Yeah, Roger. I mean, it was really as astonishing as it was predictable to watch the Democrats' heads explode with this Supreme Court immunity ruling. And it was no surprise, like I mentioned, to see them actually resort to basically dog whistles of violence. We've seen it started, of course, with Obama, who prevented the smooth transition of power. They always say that Trump is all about trying to maintain power, control power, and to eviscerate the institutions, the rule of law, and normalcy in America, while the Democrats, who have weaponized the U.S. Legal system against their political opponents, have done just that. And the moment that they can't, usurp and replace the powers to be, which is currently a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, now they want to expand the court. Now they want to diminish the legitimacy of certain justices on that court, including Thomas. Try to put these people under the microscope, send protesters at their homes. If Alito puts up a flag that they don't like, go send protesters to threaten him. If Clarence Thomas goes on a vacation with his wife, go investigate him. This is what the Democrats have resorted to. They are the sore losers. They are the ones that have one interest and only one interest in mind, and that is consolidating power against the will of the American people. And certainly I believe that the entire premise of this lawfare operation against Trump was because they understood that it was going to eventually reach the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was going to rule against these unconstitutional efforts by the Democrats. But the effort was not even simply about Trump as much as it was about the credibility of the Supreme Court. And that's exactly why the Supreme Court, as much as Donald Trump, has become squarely in the crosshairs of their efforts to delegitimize these institutions and individuals.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to George Papadopoulos, who was a foreign policy advisor to President Trump's 2016 campaign. He, like me, got jammed up in the Russian collusion hoax. We have one other thing in common. Neither one of us did anything wrong. We're going to be right back with a bit more of George Papadopoulos. In the meantime, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.